All right, let's do a reading from A Distant Mirror by Barbara W. Tuchman, the calamitous 14th century work of popular history. This is from page 329. The kings of Cyprus and France spent all winter and spring at Avignon, discussing possibilities with the Pope. On Good Friday, the crusade was proclaimed. Jean was named Captain General and took the cross along with the Count of Tancarville and other companions of the recent battering at Brignes. That marked the peak of the enterprise. King Edward, on being visited by the King of Cyprus, excused himself graciously and right sagely, and, after arousing no greater response at other courts of Europe, the King of Cyprus was forced to let the crusade lapse for the present. Having failed in his projects at Avignon, Jean was obliged to face the unpleasantness of home, that being France. He rode through his distressed realm at a leisurely pace, reaching Paris in July 1363. Here he found that the regent and council had disallowed the private treaty between the royal hostages and Edward on the grounds that it gave too much away. Worse, the Duc d'Anjou had absconded, breaking his parole. Newly married before going as a hostage, he had gone to Boulogne to meet his wife, with whom he is said to be much in love, and refused to return to Calais. Jean considered his son's act a felony upon the honor of the crown. Combined with the arrears and ransom, cancellation of the hostages treaty, to which he had assented, and non-fulfillment of other secessions, it brought his honor into disrepute and left him no way out, so he claimed, but to return to captivity. Even for the 14th century, this reasoning, in the face of political realities, seemed extreme. Jean's council and the prelates and barons of France counselled him sore to the contrary, and told him his plan was a great folly. But he insisted, saying that if good faith and honor were to be banished from the rest of the world, they should still be found in the hearts and words of princes. He departed a week after Christmas, crossing the Channel in midwinter. His going was an amazement to his contemporaries. Jean de Venette, who loved neither kings nor nobles, suggested he went back for causa joci, reasons of pleasure. Historians have offered him every excuse that he returned to avert war, or, counting on personal relations, to persuade Edward to reduce the ransom, or persuade him to call off the renewed hostilities of the King of Navarre. If these were his reasons, none was accomplished. If it was honor that took him back, what of his kingship? What did he owe to the kingdom that needed its sovereign, to the citizens who were being squeezed of their last penny to pay his ransom, to the memory of Aringos of Abbeville? Who could say what made Jean return? Perhaps it was no medieval reason, but the human tragedy of a man who, knowing himself inadequate for the task he was born to, sought the enforced passivity of prison. He arrived in London in January 1364, was greeted with lavish entertainments and processions, fell ill of an unknown malady in March, and died in April, aged 45. Edward gave him a magnificent funeral at St. Paul's, during which 4,000 torches, each 12 feet high, and 3,000 candles, each weighing 10 pounds, were consumed. Afterwards, his body was returned to France for burial in the royal Basilica of Saint Denis. King Jean had found the permanent passivity of the grave. 1,000,000 florins were still owed on his ransom, leaving the hostage unreleased. Some used the safe conduct given them from time to time and did not return despite repeated summonses. Some bought their freedom from Edward with shares of their own territories. Others simply disappeared by one means or another. Anjou's younger brother, Jean du Berry, managed so shrewdly and made so many excuses while on leave that he retained liberty and honor too. Matthew de Roy, on the other hand, perhaps because of his reputation as a fighter kept him well guarded, was still a hostage after 12 years. Enogard du Coucy, who is the main figure that Barbara Tuchman is kind of hanging this whole book around, was to be released under special circumstances. in 1365. And that is the end of chapter 8 of A Distant Mirror.